The Archetypal Tarot podcast explores universal human patterns, called archetypes, by investigating the major arcana of the ancient tarot. We recognize these archetypes because they are present in our own life stories, myths, and culture. Each card represents a stage of the journey for understanding the greater story of our lives.
Welcome to the Archetypal Tarot podcast. Where have we been? This is Julienne and I'm here with
Cyndera Quakenbush.
And we've missed you. And we just counted 8 months.
Yeah, we could have almost had a baby in that time, I'm realizing.
Oh.
Don't worry, we didn't, but we could have.
I apologize to any new listeners, but anybody who's been listening to us previously, they're probably laughing their tuchuses off right now. Cyndera and I having a baby. Oh, that would be funny.
Oh,
she'd be beautiful.
Oh, yeah, and very archetypally rich.
She'd be smart.
Yeah.
I hope.
Little bit of the fool running around.
I hope she has your legs. Anyway, a lot of the fool is obviously here with us. But so Cyndera and I have gotten together because we missed you, and we thought it would be a really good idea to just share with everybody what we have been up to in our professional lives around archetypes and images. And to let you know, too, that we will be sporadically producing more podcasts talking about the tarot, talking about archetypes, and we hope to continue to produce some very useful things for you over the coming months. So don't get rid of those subscriptions quite yet. And one of the things that I thought would be great to talk about today is, Cyndera, I'm very, very excited to talk about these new cards that you have. Okay, so just tell us about these. They're cards with these images of stones. And each of the stones have what you call naturally occurring imagery. So can we just start there and maybe tell people about where these stones came from and how they ended up on these cards?
Yeah, it already sounds totally mystifying, I'm sure. And it's funny that we've opened this show with this image of pregnancy and children that's floating around, because I feel like in these 8 months, there has been a gestation of this project, which I'm so excited to share with our audience. Some of you may know this. I may have mentioned it in a past podcast, but for those of you who haven't heard the story, I received an inheritance growing up from my father, who uncovered a rare billion-year-old kind of rock from that he found walking through Death Valley. And in fact, the full image is coming through here too. Like, he was with a partner walking through Death Valley, and the way that he's been described, the story's been told in newspapers and such, is that they stumbled upon this very rare stone. And so bringing it back to their workshops, they sliced through with these diamond saws, and they found this very intense, vivid imagery, which is basically formed from the sedimentary rock and the way that the minerals oxidized over time. So that when you look at a slice of the stone, you see all kinds of colors, and you see the way that these colors come together. You can use your imagination and see different imagery in the stones. You can see human beings, you can see animals, you can see landscapes. Maybe some of you out there have seen picture jasper, but it's way, way, way more intense and vivid even than that, which you can often see like little landscapes in picture jasper. But these really provoke the imagination and provoke a sense of storytelling. So what I've formed since we last met on this podcast is a new organization called Story Through Stone. And I'm bringing these stones to schools. I'm doing workshops with them. But the thing that I'm really excited that's come out from my work with the stones most recently are these cards. So the stones have been photographed, and I've found rough parallels to the tarot images. You know how much I love the tarot cards and the major arcana, which is what we've covered in our podcast. So I thought, are there images in the stones that could parallel these images in the major arcana, that journey that we just went through with the podcast? I just wondered if there could be parallels, and sure enough, I definitely could. Some of them are looser parallels than others, but there you go, 22 cards, beautiful full color photographs, and they make up the Story Through Stone reflection card deck.
Okay, and so you just have a lot there. So I'm going to rewind back, and I'm really super excited. I just got my deck today, and I'm very happy to have them. And there is truly nothing else out there like it. And because of that, I'm going to ask you a few questions to kind of help our listeners kind of get a better understanding of not only this discovery. I mean, there's a lot symbolically in the story you just told. Your father archetype, walking through Death Valley, stumbles upon this. Is it just one rock that he found and brought it back?
It was a location of rock, so
Okay.
it was part of the Crystal Springs Formation, which is a certain formation in Death Valley. So there was quite a bit there, and this was far before Death Valley was a national park, by the way. So at that time, there were rock hounds and people that were going out there to search for art and nature, and so he was part of that that tradition and what was going on in the 70s when he discovered it. He had a big beard. I have a picture of him jumping off of a mountain, little
he's an
sandy
explorer.
mountain thing. He was totally, I would call him an artist, adventurer.
Yeah, he's exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. And he also had very much that storyteller aspect to him too. So when he saw these images in the stone, he was like, this is like a story that Mother Nature is trying to tell. So he spent the next 20 years of his life, looking at the stone, grinding through, selecting images in the stone, because he wanted to collaborate with nature to tell nature's story.
Okay. And
yes.
And this is where anybody listening, I just want to let you know there are going to be links to, at the end of this podcast, there will be links so you can go and take a look at these stones. For some of you who are very visual, you will really see what we're talking about when something kind of a glimpse of this experience, and at least for me, is, when I was a kid, we went to church, and the benches, the pews were all wooden, and I was always seeing things in the wood, in the knots in the wood, and for me as a creative little kid, and I know a lot of other people, you can start to see things in nature, in the whirl of the knot in a piece of wood, or the way a leaf is shaped. There's very much a visceral connection for us when we're interacting with the world around us, specifically with nature. And I come from a family too of artists and people who are working with nature in this way. And so when I see these stones, I'm really, it's a natural for me to be able to look at the stone and the way it's polished and presented and immediately see an image. Like this looks very much like a magician. This looks like a wise man. And I've worked with you in the workshops that you've done with them. So I really want to kind of share with the people listening that they don't strike me as just being merely happenstance. Oh, this looks kind of like that. There really is a lot more happening here, and I have always sensed since I first met you, Cyndera, is that you are really the midwife bringing these beautiful symbols into the world, and to remind people that we are part of something larger, and that a stone is not just a stone. There is something that we can deeply relate to it. It's got something for us.
There's that birth imagery again.
Yeah, I know. I can't avoid it.
But I'm so glad that you bring that up, because about seeing the images in nature in general, because a big thing that I like to cover in the workshop, especially in ending the workshop, is that the workshops and working with the stones isn't so much about how great these stones are or how rare they are or how special they are, though indeed they are special. But that the important thing to take from seeing something like this is that it's your imagination interacting with nature that's important here. So that when you leave that workshop or interacting with the stones, you can actually take that capacity with you wherever you go. So if you're walking through a forest or a city street, that you can be tied to your environment in a meaningful way by seeing things in it. Because I feel like it's been shown throughout the ages that if we tell stories or see things in the world around us, we feel that much more inspired to take care of the world around us. And I think that's something we used to do more before we were, I don't know, looking at iPhones so much, is that we would interact with our environment and we would tell stories about the things that we saw, the way our imagination interacted with that. Yeah.
It's almost as if there's two ways to go about it, depending on your perspective, and I think both are true. So it's saying the world is alive. It's recognizing that the world is alive and that we are an inherent part of it. And so is this what you would call the other. So as you've got this card with this picture of the stone in your hand, and you're paying attention to it in a way, and you're interacting with it of like, oh, what does that look like to me? You're interacting with that image. That image is also symbolic. There's something reflecting. It's mirroring back something that's in you, and also reminding you is that it also exists in nature, in that you are connected, deeply connected to everything around. And what you talked about with the technology and iPhones, and that a lot of that is, it's paradoxical, and it's saying, oh, you're connected, but at the same time it's saying you're not really well connected. There's a very thin thread connecting you. You know, that the battery could go dead, and guess what? That connection's gone. This
Yeah.
is experientially much deeper, much richer process. So to kind of go from there, I really would love to hear more about, so we have these cards, so 22, kind of mapping loosely at times to the major arcana of the tarot. So tell me a little bit more about the cards and kind of the process that you work with these cards.
Yeah, and this leads in great, especially you mentioning the process by which it's not just about projection, though that's a huge part of it, that you see yourself in these cards, but they are coming to meet you with their own life. So yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
That's well said.
Yeah, yes, and that leads to a description of this process, which I've been honing for about a decade, the way that I work with clients with images, and I am just so happy to be sharing it in this capacity now. So with you know, and this goes with any tarot cards that you have at home, is that there can be this process by which we begin the session with a question and something that there's a lot of energy behind for yourself in your life right now. And so and just by wording that question, sometimes it's half the battle. Oh. And it helps that's the total beginning of clarifying just how, you know, I'm feeling something, what words do I need to use to articulate, God, what do I really want to know about my life right now? And once you can articulate that question, boy, you're already on the road. You're already on your tarot journey there, just by wording that question. And so, and then we approach the cards and we flip over the cards. And you can choose anything depending on how much time you have, from 3 to 6 cards. And what's great about these cards, the story through stone reflection cards, is that there's no words on them at all. And I think that this is a rare thing with tarot cards.
There's no numbers. They are just the image of the stone.
Yeah, absolutely, just the image of the stone, because this allows us to totally switch on the right brain. Once we start to see symbols or numbers or letters, the left brain is working. But by by looking at an image, our emotional, relational brain gets switched on more, so that we're going to be able to work with these images, and then from what flows through our impressions that we're getting from the images on the card will be able to be more easily translated to that left brain later on as we articulate it. But first is the metaphor, first is the image, and that's what these cards afford us. And so from what is told with the cards is that we totally release that question that we just came up with. And this is what's so funny. This is how that tarot journey really comes in. Like the Fool thinks, you know, he or she is out to discover this certain thing. Now, I'm on a journey because of this. But as we often find through our experiences in life, we have to totally let go of the thing that we thought we had to seek after. And we have to undergo experiences that, whoa, this is totally new. And that is encapsulated in this tarot process. So through the imagery, a story begins to unfold by looking at that imagery. And, you know, I'm not going to go into the whole process here, but that's the basic gist of how we approach it. And then that story that comes through in the reading becomes a metaphor for that question that was initially asked. And it almost always ties back in. It's pretty magical how it does it. I mean, I can't even explain the fact that every reading I've ever done had unexplainable insight or clarification for that person. It's amazing how that has worked. And this is what I'm so excited about with these cards, actually, is that I'm now giving these cards for free to anyone who sees me for an individual guidance session, because I can teach this tool to that person, to this client, and then they may or may not ever need to see me again, because they now have a lifelong tool, so that whenever a big life question comes up, whenever there's a major life theme that needs to be explored, whenever there's a feeling that you're a fool on a new journey, that you can have this lifelong tool that you can sit down and do this with yourself or with a friend. You can have a friend be there to help you, you know, keep yourself accountable to the story, because sometimes, you know, we can spin into wishful thinking stories.
Yeah.
But you can have a friend that can help be there with you to keep it real. I'm just so excited that I can share this with people, with the world, that this is a tool that they can use on an ongoing basis.
Me too, and I think there's really a beauty of having these cards, which are essentially just these beautiful sort of matte black. They're about the size of a playing card, maybe a little bit smaller.
Yes, and about the size of the stones, are about palm size.
And they're close to what the actual size of the stone is.
Yes,
is that
absolutely.
Right? So they're smaller cards. You can hold them in your hand, and they do contain, you know, these almost abstract images, or at least a few of them seem abstract at first. So there is that, like you said, you've got to kind of turn part of your brain off. Whereas as opposed to working with the tarot, there are immediately recognizable things and highly, deeply symbolic. So it's as if, you know, with the tarot, you look at the card and you can work with those ubiquitous images, and then you can research things and look into the symbology of the letter, or the, you know, the number 8 or this or that. They're very, very rich in a very distinct way with the tarot. But with these cards, they bring you into the abstract, and they shave off part of that intellect to let you go, I think, to a deeper, more subconscious level. And that's where a lot of the power is to it. And then I would imagine some people would be very challenged by it if they had to face it in that intellectual way. This basically, you skip that. You take that analysis, that deep psychoanalysis part, and you just have to let it go, and you work with whatever comes up. And something for me, because I've taken your workshops a number of times and obviously worked with you for a number of years, is that you really, really, what benefits you the most working with these cards and this is take away judgment. Don't judge. So it looks like a dog, but it looks like it's a witch. That let it be that. Let it know that that's the first thing that came up. There's nothing wrong with it. Don't judge what comes up. Work work with these images, because and for some people in the classes they struggle to find anything in them, and that's not bad either. You're not directed to find anything specifically, but the process of working with it is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And like image or story are very loosely interpreted in these, you know, one-on-one sessions and in workshops. An image could be a sensation in the body. It could be a feeling of nothingness. It could be all of those things. Um, and yeah, people do feel that they bring in those pressures of, or those feelings like, oh, she's saying I need to tell a story. Does that mean I need to be a good storyteller with a beginning, a middle, and an end with great character development, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And we let go of that. And it can be like a dream. It can be a glimpse. It can be a sensation. So we really loosely interpret that. And yeah, as you say, tune down the judgment and just allow whatever is there to be.
So let's just to paint the picture, I think, a little bit more for the listeners is the process of doing, would you call it a reading with a card, or would you call it, because it's not a reading per se. Is there some terminology that you use when you're working with a client and say you've 3 cards or 4 cards? Take us through that. What would you call it, and take us through a little bit of what that looks like, what's happening.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you asked about that, because I think as it evolves, it's becoming less of a tarot reading, which was a terminology I used before because I lacked any other.
Sure, there isn't anything else.
It was very, but then it gets it gets very tied to that. Those associations of fortune telling,
predicting,
and yeah, and I very much like to distinguish what we're doing here, which is more psychologically based than, you know, based in that fortune telling tradition. I really like the term reflection, and that's why they're called reflection cards, not tarot cards. And because what you're seeing in the face of the stone, in the face of the image, it's its own thing, as we talked about earlier. It's its own billion-year-old story, its own billion-year-old stone. And that may have an influence on you and an impression on you. Maybe it's reflecting itself into you, but there's also that undeniably personal aspect that's going to be a part of that too. Something that comes from your personal unconscious, of like, you see something very specific and that no one else may see that image, and so there's a reflection of you now in that interaction with the card. So I'm calling them Story Through Stone reflection cards. I've called the sessions that I'm doing with individuals individual guidance sessions. I like the word guide a lot. That I'm a person that's there to be with you on this journey inward. And that's also led to my motto, which I'm just so excited about, which is find your story within the story of stone.
Yeah.
So we're both finding that story within ourselves, but then we're realizing we are ourselves in a world that is all connected. So we find our stories within ourselves and in the story of stone, in the world. Because these stones go back 1.3 to 1.7 billion years. And they've been dated by geologists at Stanford. So I'm going to have those letters posted on the website here too. So you could take a look at that and connect with the world that way.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I've been a fan since, you know, I met you, and there truly is nothing else like it. And for me, I see the appeal of people who are attracted to learning more about the stories that happen throughout the tarot. You know, that you and I kind of referred to as a hero's journey. It's, you know, it's a different journey, but what people come to the tarot for, besides that sort of like first, I think, sort of cursory level of, you know, predict the future, But what we really are looking for, I think, beyond that is kind of like a deeper connection to the symbolic world, sort of the
Mm.
deeper truths beyond that, the ego level. It's something that I think is a deep call within a lot of people. And if you're attracted to the tarot, beyond that kind of gypsy fortune telling kind of part of it, the superstitious part is, we want to connect with the deeply symbolic. And the fact that people, I think, are in the tarot has survived
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
through,
Mm-hmm.
the Spanish Inquisition and beyond,
Yeah.
is that it's valued at a deeper level by many people because of its strengths of its symbols and the way that we can kind of connect to it. And then what you've produced is something that I think it's even more, primordial. It's something like it. Then it's if you worked with the tarot and you're looking at things symbolically, you can go, I think, at an even deeper level with these reflection cards, because you're not necessarily, you don't have to learn anything, you don't have to keep
Mm-hmm.
any sort of relationships to what this is supposed to mean in your mind. You let go of that, and yet there is this nascent connection between these cards that you've picked out, and how at the same time they can also map, one to one, and how, you and I work together, and because there's more than just these 22 stones.
Yes.
You
Many
have
more.
quite a few that.
Yes, and what I'm hoping to do in the future, I mean, already these cards have been pretty popular with the people that I've mentioned it to, been selling them to clients and students when I teach yoga therapy and so forth. And at the local yoga studio, they're kicking off pretty good. But in the long term, I'm wanting to do a larger deck of maybe 50 cards. And it's actually returning to what my father had originally sought to do, which was to tell the story the of the world with the images of the stones themselves. So you've got like the creation of the earth. Everything is very chaotic. So the more amorphous, abstract images, volcanic things going on in those earlier cards. And then you can go to the first cells of life, many years after that creation of Earth, of course. And then, the first fish, little
Crawling out of the
creatures,
soup.
yeah, crawling out of the soup, and the first mammals, and before that, the dinosaurs, of course. I have a dinosaur stone. And all the way to the dawn of human beings. And so it'll be, we've explored in our podcasts in the past how there's a story told through the major arcana. So this will be like another story told, but on a very big scale of the Earth's history. So I'm just really, really excited about pulling that together as well. Though there are parallels in this current deck to the major arcana, I haven't yet written a book yet that's going to parallel or talk about those tarot archetypes. But that's definitely a future project. But what's great about these cards is that you don't actually need that right now. You can have these cards and begin that process that was described earlier in this program. You can do that right away. And there's a little booklet that comes with the cards that will describe that process in detail so that you can do it for yourself. So they are already ready to go, ready to use, ready for many reflections.
And I think that's all you need. And I think it would be fun for people who are interested in getting them. Is the booklet just gives you the process that you use for yourself and with your clients. So you get that, and then there's no numbers on these cards. You just start working with them. And so if you work with them in that way, and then there's a different methodology. You can look at them as that major arcana, and maybe if you got them, you could figure out what you thought the major arcana was that exists in the cards.
Yeah, exactly. And I do put them in order when you get them. So I know it'll be tempting to shuffle them right away. But if you do get them, you can look and see, oh, the first one is the Fool. And, so if you are interested in that, there's a little secret order system there for you.
Nah. Shuffle them. Shuffle them as soon as you get them. Decide for yourself what you think it is. I'm just saying, me, I'm a troublemaker.
Yeah,
So
that's why we're doing a podcast together, for sure. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's been terribly fun. I think both of us in this last 8 months since our last podcast edition, we've both been keeping very, very busy with various projects. You're getting these cards out into the world, which I'm really happy about. Um, and we have a project together, which, sorry, we're not going to actually go into too much detail about, but that we're really excited to be producing something else for the world. Based on the Archetypal Tarot podcast that we've done and more, because I think we're just in a stage in the process where you don't talk about it yet. So
We're
I'm
being high priestesses behind the veil right
kind of,
now.
yeah. So we said, oh, do we want to talk about it and tell everyone? We might have, no. I think it's just best to keep it quiet, but certainly.
Well, I think it's nice for our audience to know that we're still here and that we're working together and
Yes.
we're doing our own archetypal projects in the world, because you're also tell them a bit about what you've been up to.
I am, and I think maybe we'll do another podcast in a month or two about it. I am acting as a producer for a gentleman named Jim Curtin, and Jim is one of my most favorite people in the world, and he is the person that I first learned sort of the skill and the methodology of really viewing films and movies archetypally, of seeing those archetypes come alive on the screen and how to work with that. And he is one of the main teachers at Carolyn Mace's CMed Institute in Chicago. And when I did my training there, every night of the classes, we would watch a film with Jim, and we would get the commentary, the play-by-play in the film of the both what was happening on the screen archetypally with the characters and the different situations and the choices that we see the characters make and how they map to our own choices. And just it brought things alive, and I knew from then I wanted to do it, and I have since taught archetypes in films, and since he's based in Los Angeles and he can't always get out to the rest of the world to teach with the film, we have created an self-guided audio workshop.
So cool.
Yeah, it's been some techie stuff trying to figure out how it can work because we can't sync it to the film, like commentaries, as DVD extras. But we've finally gotten that together and actually ended up writing a really beautiful book, a workbook to go with it. And that'll be coming out fairly soon. And the film we chose, which I thought was a really good start, is Pixar's Ratatouille. So if anyone's seen that, it's a wonderful film, and he's mapping it to the hero's journey and really talking about fate and destiny. What's the difference between fate and destiny, and what are the choices related to that? So I'm really excited to be a core part of bringing that into the world, and information about that will be on the show notes, as well as some pictures of the stones for your story through stone and all the links. So anybody who's have their interest piqued by anything that we've talked about today, the end of the show I will announce the show notes and give you a web address to go to find out more, and from there's lots of resources and images and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
meeting me again for our
absolutely.
podcast. This
I've
is
kind of
great.
missed this.
Yeah, me too. Feels like very familiar and warm and cozy.
It is.
I love it.
And one thing I want to make sure, anybody who's enjoying these podcasts, let us know. Feel free to make a comment on iTunes, or to, find us on Facebook, or send us an email. You can email us with the address that's also at the end of the show. And we love hearing from you.
We really do.
It's just such an inspiring thing to know that, people listen to this podcast and they're getting something out of it. So if you have requests, or anything you want to hear on the show, let us know. We hope to maybe every 2 to 3 months be producing a new podcast here. So keep those subscriptions going. We've got a lot more to come.
And we know you like the minor arcana, but it just sounds very exhausting. What were we doing? The major arcana for like 2 years?
It was almost 2 years to do the major arcana. So, don't make me do it. You know what? Honestly, being kind of where I come from, I don't get that excited about the minor arcana.
Yeah.
I think they're rich, and I think people can figure them out really easily. I mean, they're very, I don't know. I think they're minor. I don't know.
They're the minor arcana. All right.
I could be wrong. I don't know, but I we have talked about doing one show just talking about the symbolisms of, the pentacles and the wands, and looking at that, and that is something that's still on our list of things to do. So
excellent.
Go ahead and email us and beg us. That's fine, or
That's
threaten us, whatever you need to do.
Give us an offer we can't
Tell
refuse.
me I've got a bad attitude. It's totally fine.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to talk to you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to become a part of the Archetypal Tarot team by becoming one of our patrons. Our patrons are awesome. So if you're interested, visit tiny.cc/tarot for more information and the awesome rewards for joining. That's tiny.cc/tarot. Thank you for listening to this special edition of the Archetypal Tarot Podcast. For more information, links, photos, and all the rest, visit our show page at archetypist.com/stone. That's archetypist.com/stone. And a very special thanks to Kat Tassini and her bandmates from Wildcat Apollo for our new show theme music. You can find them on iTunes or on their website, wildcatapollo.com. Thanks for listening.